When I opened my eyes in the morning, both my wife and $720,000 in my company account were gone. But the real betrayal was not in my wife, but in the partner I shared a table with. And my revenge? It came when they could never have predicted it. My name is Mark Reynolds. I'm 38 years old, born in Texas, but I've been working on tech startups in San Diego for the last 12 years. I went to college at MIT, and as soon as I graduated, I started working in cybersecurity. And 3 years ago, I started a digital security and cryptocurrency startup with my childhood friend Jake. The company grew fast. We even had a few government agencies among our clients. My wife, Anna, is a legal counselor. I met her 7 years ago, and like me, she was career-oriented and always known as a cool-headed person. She was supportive in the early years, but lately there was a distance towards me. But the real rupture happened as the company grew. It all started on a Friday morning. I remember how still it was in San Diego, a quiet morning, but I felt uneasy inside. Anna wasn't home that morning. There was no towel in the bathroom. The coffee machine was untouched. "See you later, Mark," she usually said on her way to work. But this time there was nothing. Just silence. At first I wasn't worried. Maybe she had an early meeting. Maybe someone in her family was sick. Maybe he just didn't want to argue. But soon I realized that her phone was switched off, which was unusual for Anna. She was always available. Even if she was on an airplane, she would text me. My discomfort gave way to shock when I arrived at the office. Every morning, as part of my routine, I checked the company accounts. I did the same thing that day, but what I saw split my life in two. A total of $720,000 had been deducted from the company's main account in a single transaction. It was done at 3:17 a.m. And what's even stranger, this transfer was done through an API access that I had no knowledge of. System security was my job. This couldn't have just been a mistake. The first thing I did was call my partner Jake. "Jake, we've got a massive outflow from our system. Do you know what it is?" Jake's voice was a little shaky, but he quickly recovered. "It's probably a system error. Mark, I noticed it this morning. I've escalated it to IT. We'll sort it out in a couple of hours." But I recognized that voice. It was hiding something. "Jake, this system was only accessible to you and me, and this API move can only be done by someone on the inside," I said. There was a moment of silence on the other end of the phone. Then, "Mark, don't panic. I'll take care of it." And he hung up. I couldn't stay in the office after that conversation. I was storming inside, but there was still a calmness on my face. What I felt at that moment was not anger. It was a cold emptiness. I went home, and when I checked the mail at home, my hand trembled. The documents in the envelope trembled before my eyes. Divorce papers, signed by Anna. And the strangest thing, they were dated 2 weeks ago. So without giving me any indication, the plan had already begun. But there was something worse. I found a power of attorney attached to the documents. Anna had delegated access to the company accounts to Jake. Everything looked legitimate. Signatures, notarization, all the documents were complete. And then I blacked out. I hadn't just been dumped. I had been professionally, cold-bloodedly trapped. Jake was my childhood friend. I knew him since I was 17. Even though we went to different schools and college, we stayed in touch. I brought him investors, introduced him to clients. I coded 70% of our system. He was with me at the breaking moments of my life. When my father passed away, he was by my bedside until morning. When the first investment came in, we wrote plans through the night. And now, together, these two stabbed me in the back. That night, I couldn't sleep. I had hundreds of questions in my head. When did it start? Who came up with the idea first? How easy had it been to stay with me and carry out this plan? The next day, I checked Anna's cell phone signal. The last signal was from the San Francisco airport, so they had escaped. When I got to Jake's office, everything was locked. The computers had been taken, the servers dismantled. He'd even taken his coffee cup. But you know what was the scariest thing? No one called me. Not Anna, not Jake. No explanation, no apology. It was like I didn't exist. That was worse than stealing money. It was saying, "We underestimate your intelligence. We know you can't reach us." But there was something they forgot. I was a cybersecurity expert, and I had found thousands of system vulnerabilities. But this time I was going to solve not one system, but two people. The first day I did nothing. I didn't call Jake. I didn't call Anna. I didn't even inform my friends. I just kept quiet. Because in situations like this, everyone reacts quickly. I had to stay cool. I was alone in the house with only a few of Anna's things around. I sat on the couch and stared into space for hours, into the darkness of the night, then the sunrise. That night I decided I would not fight. I was going to hunt. The first order of business was to check the company's digital footprint. I'd been stripped of access to the main account, but I still controlled a system embedded in the core of the company. A backdoor I'd written years ago because I didn't trust Jake. Now it gave me a breathing tube to survive. I snuck into the servers. I analyzed the logs. I realized that Jake had started a new company that copied our software almost exactly. It's called Nova Cybertech. The new logo, the colors, the slogan, everything was fancy, but the content was my own. The lines of code, the algorithms, the user interface, it was all mine. Just like Anna, he stole me. And it got worse. Jake had already started marketing our software to other countries, and the money from that sale went into a bank account in Panama. The same account that the $720,000 they stole from the company went into, but they made a mistake. One of the transfers bounced back from Panama and hit the US systems. That crumb was enough. It was a trail, and I know how to follow a trail. I spent the next days just watching where they went, who they talked to, what they planned. I wrote them down one by one. I found team members on Jake's LinkedIn account. I invited a few of them to a job interview for a fake software company. During the interview, they described my software to me as groundbreaking new technology. Inside, I just laughed. Anna was living under a fake name in a city near the Mexican border, but the digital traces he left there were still linked to an old iCloud account. Photos, passport scans, hotel reservations, and one more detail. Every time the account in Panama was logged in, it received a security notification via iCloud. That was enough for me to find him. It didn't take me long to find out the date of Jake's meeting with investors. He was going on a high-dollar investment round at a luxury hotel in San Jose. He was trying to put $1 billion valuation on software he didn't have, but there was something he didn't know. I had already contacted the federal agency. I had prepared a dossier documenting that the codes were mine, that I was excluded from the system, that I had been cheated with a power of attorney. I presented the documents to Brandon, an FBI agent, an old college friend of mine. At first he hesitated, but when I showed him both the technical evidence and the traces of the international money transfer, the case was official. But before the operation started, Brandon turned to me and said, "Face him if you want. You have 5 minutes." When I went down to the lobby of the hotel where Jake was staying, he smiled at me as if everything was fine. He took a sip of his coffee. "Mark, interesting to see you here," he said. And I looked him in the eye and said, "You know, Jake, sometimes people are silent, but silence is just the sound of preparation." And his eyes got big. I could see the tension in his face. "What do you mean?" he asked. By then, the FBI agents had already entered the hotel. Brandon appeared behind Jake, and he just said this sentence, "Mr. Carter, please come with us." The color drained from Jake's face. His lips trembled, but he did not resist, because he realized that the game was over. There wasn't a tear in my eye. I hadn't taken revenge. I had only done justice. That night I went up to my room and looked out the window at the city. The chaos was still there, but something inside me had changed. I was no longer a victim. I was no longer just a man. I was now a system that knew how to survive. The courtroom was like a cold theater stage. No one made eye contact. Jake was whispering with his lawyer in the front row, and Anna was sitting in the back corner, staring at the floor. Everything we had built together for 3 years. Here today, he was stuck in the files. The judge went through the files. The FBI's cyber fraud report, comparison of software codes, forged powers of attorney, account traces in Panama. Everything was recorded. I was silent, because sometimes the most powerful word is silence. The trial lasted only 2 hours. Jake's lawyer said the crime was not intentional, but here was not just a victim, but a man who had patiently built his own justice. When the judge read the verdict, the courtroom went silent. Jake was sentenced to 9 years in federal prison. Anna was found indirectly responsible for the fraud. 3 years, probation and restitution. 80% of the stolen money was recovered through an account in Panama and returned to me. But it wasn't about the money. It was about not losing myself even though everything was stolen. As I left the courtroom, journalists bombarded me with questions. But I said one sentence. When you feel betrayed, you may want to shout. But the real power lies in working in silence. In the following weeks, I changed the name of the company. I built a new team. This time, with people who knew the value of trust and labor. In every line of code, in every customer presentation, I used that betrayal as fuel. I rose again, but I was different now. I was cooler, more careful, and above all, I was stronger. One night, months later, I received a message in my email from Anna. She wrote a short sentence. "You deserved it, we lost." I didn't delete it, but I didn't reply, because some messages only remind you of the finish line. I still remember those days today, the days when I went below zero. But if that fall hadn't happened, maybe I would still be drifting into the abyss without even realizing it, with people I trusted blindly. Sometimes betrayal is not about losing. Sometimes it's the first step to finding the right path. And now it's your turn. Have you ever been betrayed like this? Instead of silently taking revenge, have you let justice take its course? Right, I also kept silent, but I didn't forget. In the comments, let's see how many people have experienced the same pain. And if this story moved you, subscribe to the channel, because we're not just telling stories here. We give voice to souls reborn.